Well, hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Steve Jorson with Northeast Metro Climate Action. We are a volunteer-run community organization with members in White Bear Lake, Vadnais Heights, North Oaks, Matamidi, and Shoreview. Our mission is to raise awareness on the climate crisis through events like this that we hold every month. And we work with state and local representatives to advance climate action. And we also participate in community activities that require our help for in climate-related things. And we also get together to go to rallies like a lot of us were at today. The Earth Day, Boundary Waters, what was it, to save the boundary waters, Friends of the Boundary Waters, yeah, at the state capitol. We have Jay Drake Hamilton from Fresh Energy, going to talk about the future of natural gas, or fossil gas, as we call it, in Minnesota. Yes, that will be May 8th here at 6:30 and online as well. In Northeast Metro Climate Action, we acknowledge we are meeting on traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people who continue to live in this area and exercise their treaty rights. Tonight, we are also co-hosted by, we have a lot of co-hosts, Resilient Roseville, Vote Climate, East Metro Climate Collaborative, Northwest Metro Climate Action, Indivisible North Metro Environmental Team, Climate Justice Team of St. Croix Valley Indivisible, Sustainable Stillwater, and the Vadnais Heights Green Team. And just a couple of housekeeping things for those online. Please keep muted, and if you have any questions, please put those in the chat. And I will be monitoring the chat throughout. If there are questions, sometimes I can just answer them on the chat. Otherwise, I can ask them to our guest speaker tonight. That's it for housekeeping. So tonight's speaker is B. Rosas from Climate Generation. He's the policy manager at Climate Generation. And growing up in Minneapolis, B saw opportunities and successes with community organizing and decided that's what he wanted to do. B is currently advocating for climate education at the state and national level. So, Pete.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Hello, friends on Zoom as well. Thank you so much for the introduction. Like they were saying, my name is B. Rosas. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm with Climate Generation. Today, we're going to be talking about climate justice education specifically. And I kind of always like to start off with a quote. I'm going to be citing a Green New Learning Agenda from the Center for Universal Education at Brookings. And two of their authors actually wrote this quote that says, "The role of education is to develop the transformative capacity of individuals and society to seed broader systems change for both social and climate justice." And that is what we are rooted at Climate Generation. For today's agenda, we're going to just be doing a brief history of what climate change education has looked like in the past, some ways or frameworks of how we can teach it, specifically talk about climate justice education, the goals and the results of that, and also how it looks like in practice. From there, we're going to be talking about some legislation that we're pushing for in terms of climate justice education, and fingers crossed, if there's time, a Q&A. So before we get started, definitely want to talk a little bit about Climate Generation. I also want to say I am a pretty fast speaker. I am Dominican. We talk a little quick. So if at any point you need me to repeat myself or slow down, please feel free to tell me so that I can do so. But otherwise, with Climate Generation, we love to challenge the systems and the root causes of the climate crisis. We do this by equipping our communities, our base, and our friends with the tools needed to advocate for real solutions. Of course, we are driven by climate change education, and that reflects really really well in both of the programs that we work on. One of them is the Teach Climate Network. This is our specific educator program that provides support and resources for those who are teaching about climate change. And we love to say that this is for any teacher, whether you're in a formal setting like a school or in an informal setting like an after-school program, a summer program. We just really want to make sure we're building a community for educators and a network for educators. And we do that through hosting workshops. We create curriculum. So at Climate Generation, we actually have a free resource library for anyone that wants to download the curriculums that we have. Our most recent one is around food waste, and it's for elementary school students. So it's a free resource. People from Minnesota all the way up to all the way down to Australia even download our resources. So we are very proud of the curriculum we create. But also we are advocating for professional development. So giving teachers those trainings on how to teach climate change is very important as well in our work. At Climate Generation, we also believe in an intergenerational approach. So we also work with young people through our Youth Environmental Activist Network. That is a network that I'm more closely related to. This is our high school program, so grades 9 through 12. We are providing them with community building skills and a space to also just learn in general. We are supporting youth and as they step into their leadership roles, and we do this through mentorships, workshops, and just connecting them to local social movements. So all of the learnings that we will go through today are ones that they actually are getting. I'm also teaching them on our legislative process, and I'm teaching them on organizing. So it's a really great program that we're also now doing with teachers. We have a whole fellowship now where we're paying educators to go through the same type of workshops that we're doing too. So a lot of great work. I always say that we could always use more support in that work. So I love to kind of spread the message of what we're doing. I'm just always happy to support what we're up to. As a part of the presentation and as part of the work that I do with young people as well, I always love to ask the question, and I'm hoping to get some answers from you all in the audience or in the chat, but how were you taught about climate change? I would love to hear how people were taught climate change. What lessons were you learning? How long did it last? And what did you take away? So we could definitely sit with that for a little bit. I have my own answers to this, but I would love to hear from folks in the chat or in the audience. And you could raise your hand and just speak. Go ahead. Yeah, for sure. Thank you all so much for giving those awesome responses. I always answer this question. I was born and raised in South Minneapolis. Right now, South Minneapolis is considered an environmental justice community because of the high levels of pollution, the multiple sources of pollution that surround our neighborhoods. And of course, we're a very diverse community, which is very intentional that we are surrounded by multiple sources of pollution. But I was never taught about that. I was never given lessons on who's surrounding our neighborhoods, what they're polluting, and how that's affecting us as South Minneapolis residents. I was taught greenhouse gases. I was taught about the carbon cycle for about 2 weeks. And this was in middle school. And after that, I think the last time I really learned or took a deeper dive into climate change was in college. And I think that's a common theme that a lot of youth and a lot of people in general just kind of have, right? It's like we kind of touch on it in middle school, elementary school, high school, and then we don't really hear about it unless we want to in college, right? And so I always like to ask this question because, as we look at the history of climate education over the years, there's several buckets that we kind of do this through, right? Late 19th century, we are seeing people start to reconnect with the earth and its natural resources, right? Really put your feet in the dirt and just walk and just really get to explore what's in your neighborhood, the natural resources and the benefits that they give your community. And then from there, we really saw that a lot of people felt a responsibility to really treat the planet well. So in the late 60s and the 70s, we start to see that this ecosystems literacy starts to come up, right? Learning about our different environments, our different biomes, and learning about how these environments change over time, whether it's through us as human beings or naturally. And it's no mistake, of course, that as we learn a little bit more about climate change, the environment, that we see a lot of great policy come through. For those who might not know, in 1969, the Environmental Policy Act through Nixon was passed. In that time as well, we saw the National Environmental Education Act passed in 1970. And of course, 55 years ago today was our first Earth Day. So happy Earth Day, by the way, everyone. And so we see here that we're learning, right? We're getting the tools and the education to learn more about the environment. And it starts to make us want to care more and want to advocate more and want to show up more. I think a lot of folks are shocked when they hear that the first Earth Day in 1970 was actually attended by over 20 million people on the streets, not just all over the world, but in the country, right? So it's not any secret and it's not a coincidence that the more we expose folks to environmental change, environmental justice, that they actually want to do something about it. And that kind of leads us as well. And I always like to say that the 1970 was pretty bookmarked well because that was also when the Clean Air Act passed by Nixon too. So again, you see a list of all these different policies and just government actions that were being taken on, and it was because of that advocacy work. And this goes well into the Earth Summit of 1992, and this was when the UN gathered a whole bunch of other countries, now we know as the Conference of the Parties, where we try to figure out what are we doing to contribute or reduce our greenhouse gas emissions as a country? I can't say that the US has always been great on that. Climate Generation actually goes to these big UN conferences, and it's kind of a little disappointing to see what role we don't play in making sure we're a part of this global community, right? And so what we see here from 1992 is that the UN establishes their UN Convention on Convention Framework on Climate Change, right? So it's this treaty as a global community to agree on what goals we have as a global community to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Again, we're seeing that this advocacy work is going from a small scale to a larger global scale as well. During this time is when we start to learn about the practice of sustainability, right? Again, people are starting to feel like the government has a responsibility to do something, and now we have a responsibility to do something as well. And this is when we start to see people start to learn about having eco-friendly lives, right? So again, when we are talking about education, I was made to do the measuring your carbon footprint. And that was also a big project that we had to do. So I was measuring every single thing that I did. How long did I leave the lights on? How long did I leave the water running? How long did I leave all these electronics on? And for the most part, that was my climate education, is like, you did all these bad things, now fix it. And I think that is where we start to kind of see the current state of climate education work, right? We're learning about the science behind climate change and the climate crisis, and there's some ways that we can prevent it, right? So it really is that surface level understanding of the climate crisis that we kind of start to see today. One more question for the group. When you look at all of these, what is missing? When you look at all these frameworks and all these different ways of learning, give folks a minute to kind of sit with that, but what is missing between all of these? If folks don't, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's that. And I always like to say that the ways that we are seeing here is that there's a couple lenses that we're teaching climate change. It's through the science, so we're learning about greenhouse gases. And it's also through behavior. So we're learning about how we as individuals can change the way that we live. But what's typically missing is how we can do something about it, right? So that systems thinking, that justice focus, and this is where climate justice education comes about, right? So we are learning about the science behind this, but we're not learning about the social aspects when it comes to the climate crisis. So climate justice education really goes beyond the science and addresses how racism really has made climate change worse for Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. And it does this by really teaching students the root causes of climate change. And I'll dig a little deeper into what this means, right? But we have pretty big terms here, like colonialism, extractivism, capitalism. These things are really taught to students along with patterns of power. How have our elected officials managed this topic of climate change in the past? Was it good? Was it bad? And what do we want to adopt into the future? What this does for students is that it really does create a container for them to think of climate solutions and how they can combat the climate crisis. You can't really think of solutions if you're not talking about it, and you can't really think about this if you don't relate to it either. So that's why that social piece is super important when it comes to teaching about climate change. And also it supports students through their own climate anxiety, and also some research on what that looks like. But a lot of students, especially nowadays, they have access to social media and they're seeing all these different stories and they're seeing all these different tragedies happening around the world. And they just are kind of like, what are we going to do? I'm only 15. I don't know what to do. Right. And so it gives them a lot of anxiety because it's when they leave school is what they witness. This climate change, the climate crisis doesn't just leave because you leave school or work. It's there, especially if you live in these environmental justice communities. So it really does create a container for them to do this. It also introduces lessons that are more hands-on and are more playful and critical thinking, and also are rooted in some problem solving. And the beauty of this as well is that climate change is such a big, complicated, and deep topic. And climate justice education is saying it needs to be taught in all the subjects, all the class, in all the grades, not just in science. As we were kind of talking about it, I only remember learning about climate change through my science classes. You don't learn about it in history. You don't learn about it in math. You don't learn about it in language arts, right? And those skills are really important for us to really manage and really take action when it comes to addressing the climate crisis. Just learning about the science is great, but what else can we gain from that? And that is what climate justice education is doing for us. And so, like I was saying, there are several frameworks or ways that we can teach about climate change education. And I say, and I think a whole bunch of other experts agree, that we need all three of these in order for there to be a quality climate change education for students. So we talk about the science focus, and this really helps us in the growing green economy that we're seeing, right? As we transition away from fossil fuels and want to develop just transition, we need that technology, we need that math, we need that science, and that's important for us to teach students on how to have a carbon-free world and a carbon-free future. And again, we're learning about behaviors, so our cognitive and social emotional skills that will help us as individuals think and act in a more environmental friendly way. And those two combined really create skills for this green transformation, as they like to call it. So this is that justice and systems focus kind of framework. So this is really challenging the underlying reasons why there are inequalities and oppression, and how that is being perpetuated through the climate crisis as well. So all of these three are very, very important. And it's why we mentioned that it needs to be taught in all subjects, not just science, right? Because we could do it here, but then you're leaving these other two out. And in order to really have a quality education for young people, like I said, a lot of the times we just stop at the science. And for me, that is daunting. That is scary. You don't know how to slow it down, but you know that it's ramping up, right? And I feel like the green life and the green transformation skills are really going to help us not only see the what, but how we can fix it. And so that's why it's important to really mention these three. Of course, I'm focusing on green transformation. That is something I'm going to always be pushing for, but I'm also going to also be advocating for those two as well as we kind of do our advocacy work. And it's important that we do that, right? Because in a 2024, again, this is just last year, so it's not an old report, through the Yale Program on Climate Change Education report, 62% of Americans rarely or never really discuss global warming with families or friends. And this was out of a group of about over 1,000 people from all over the country. 62% is very scary. When we don't talk about the climate crisis is when we stop caring. And that is very, very concerning as we kind of go through our day-to-day lives to see that 62% never talk about it. I don't know if it's just me, but I always talk about it with my friends and family, right? But that's the thing is I'm very involved in this work, right? I know these lessons, kind of how you were saying, I picked up the lessons on my way and now I'm sharing them with folks. But a lot of the times people don't get those lessons, right? A lot of people don't take the routes that we take to learn about these things. And this is what it ends up happening, is that a lot of people don't talk about it. And if we don't talk about it, then the care and the future of it doesn't really stay alive. And we start to see this climate denial start to kind of go up, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's kind of being perpetuated too. But also in 2024, the Pew Research Center did some surveying on how Americans view climate change. This is out of a group of over 9,000 people. 56% of Americans are anxious about the future with climate, and 48% of them are confused about all the information that is out there about climate change, right? Like I was saying, it's very daunting to see all the data, to see all the research, to see everything that's going on in the world. It's also really important to mention that in this same study, 51% of people are also suspicious of climate change organizations and the people who are advocating for that. I don't see that as being unintentional. We definitely see how that's becoming a thing, especially through right-wing people and climate denial. And also about 34% of the people surveyed feel guilt for not doing enough. But I also want to recognize, how can you know what to do if you're not taught what to do, right? So that is why climate justice education is really important. And as we go through, these are the different skills that people tend to pick up when you're looking at the different frameworks. So this skills for green jobs, that was that science-based framework that I was talking about. And you learn stuff like data analysis, research. So when people look at like all the data and the research that's out there about climate change education, you're able to give students an opportunity to look at it, know what they're looking at, and be able to interpret it in their own way, which is why it's important that we teach them those science skills. When we look at green life skills, we are also talking about communication, right? That study that said 67% of people don't know how to talk with people or don't is because how do you talk about climate change? How do you naturally bring it up? How do you naturally have conversations? And so that's a really important thing that we need to also teach students on top of coping with their emotions and coping with that uncertainty, right? There's a lot that we don't know still about climate change. And that could be either very scary or very motivating. And so it's good to show students that complexity. It's good to show them that empathy. It's good to show them those critical thinking skills when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis. And of course, we finally go through those green transformation skills, that justice focus work. And this is where we give young people more political agency. How do you want to get involved? Do you want to get involved? And what does that look like? And it also helps them kind of learn those like ways of disruptive and normative thinking as well. And it also kind of helps them plan for these types of things. And it helps them kind of really analyze and critique the systems that we're living under. And I relate this back to ethnic studies. If people remember ethnic studies at all, ethnic studies is doing the same thing. It's teaching people the history of marginalized groups in our country and our communities, and teaching them the history of how our systems have treated them in the past. And it's good to remember those things so that when we move forward, we don't repeat those mistakes. So I always say, and we're a proud member of the Ethnic Studies Coalition in Minnesota, actually, we say that ethnic studies and climate justice education go hand in hand, and they're very important to really amplify and advocate for as climate activists as well. And I say this as well, all these different skills are really important for these young people to learn, especially learn on their own. What we are seeing right now is that social media, and I always say YouTube specifically, is really, how do I say this? It's a podium for right-wingers right now. This report came out just yesterday from the Yale Climate Connections and Media Matters, and it says 8 out of the 10 popular online shows are spreading climate misinformation. And as you can see here in the screenshot that I provided, they're all right-wingers, right? And these aren't small numbers. Joe Rogan has 3.9 million viewers. That is pretty scary. And so when we're looking at these numbers, it can be very scary and very daunting. And you're like, oh my God, the future is screwed. But that is the importance of learning these skills, right? Critical thinking in terms of being like, I know that's wrong. I know that that's false. I know that what you're saying to me right now is misinformation. And it's important that we recognize these types of numbers. And it's important that we recognize what avenues of information youth are going towards right now. And it's social media, it's online. And that's why I like to, I typically include another report, but this one literally just came out yesterday. And I was like, perfect timing. Let me share this with the group. But it's very concerning. And it is why programs like the ones we have at Climate Generation and other programs around climate justice education are super important for us to really like have into our kids, right? When we teach them these skills, when we teach them the ability to strategically think, critically think, and name that this is misinformation, we can avoid all of this. But we're not giving youth that opportunity to learn that. They're not getting those skills. Like I said, I was only given 2 weeks to learn about carbon cycles and greenhouse gases, which is great. But we really need to start digging deeper into how youth can learn these skills and more. There's so many other more that they can learn through climate justice education. And of course, when it comes to climate justice education, it's a lot of work that we're doing. We are tackling decades of misinformation that has been happening, not only from this year. I mean, as we can see here, misinformation is still happening, but it has a long, nasty history of being led by these fossil fuel industry and the companies that are doing it. So we see here, I mean, Mobile right here saying like, hey, they're lying to our kids. Climate change isn't that bad. And this came out in 1970. So it's really important to look at the way that they're really trying to frame climate change. They're trying to frame it as a scary thing that we shouldn't talk about, because if we talk about it, then it opens the floodgates to all these scary feelings. And you could also see here, right, real climate solutions won't happen without gas or oil. So what they're doing here is really embedding like, you need us to survive as a society, you need us to survive as a person. And I think the biggest concern for me here is the seal of scholastic approval. So for folks who don't know, the coal mining industry actually created their own curriculum back in 2009, I want to say, so not super long ago. And the scholastic people who, you know, all their resources, their books and everything, they're all in all our schools. They approved it. They approved it. No vetting process. They were like, great, talk about coal, talk about how it's a good thing. And this is, I like to show this a lot too, because it really drives home why we need to create our own curriculums that reflect climate justice education. A lot of pushback happened when they approved of this, and it's since been removed. It did not last even 4 months. Like they saw it, people were like, get that out of our schools, and they pulled it out. So it's good that that's happening. But again, a lot of people would not have known about it and given those critical thinking skills of like, that's not right. Why is this in our school? And also they were giving a lot of one-sided arguments to why coal is good and not really critiquing it. You're not really giving a proper education to young people if you're not showing both sides to an argument. That's always something that I've picked up when working with educators, is you have to present everything and give them the skills to be like, what's wrong, what's right. And that is political agency. When you're not doing that, that's indoctrination. And that's exactly what was happening here. So it's important that we look at all the misinformation that's happening, because it really reflects on this number, 62%. Rarely talk about it. And so when we're thinking about this too, I look back even as recent as 2009, National Geographic did a whole America Through the Lens, and they talked positively about fossil fuels. And I'll read it out loud. In 1859, oil prospectors struck the first oil near Titusville, Pennsylvania. The rise of the railroad and steel industry made oil more readily available nationwide. Railroads transported oil long distances, and the steel industry provided a strong material for constructing pipelines, drilling equipment, and tanks. Initially, oil's main purpose was to fuel lamps, but soon oil became necessary to lubricate the machinery that ran American industries. In the early 1900s, oil was an essential part of the new automobile industry and would later provide heat and electric power to the country as well. So reading this, right, on the surface, you're like, okay, they're just telling us about what oil does, how it shows up, and what we can use it for. But they're using really big words like necessary, essential, and really pointing out why we need oil and why we can't move away from oil, right? So it's that language that's being sneakily embedded into all of our educational materials that we really need to start looking out for. But again, we're not given those skills to look out for these things. So how can we do that? Again, why climate justice education is super, super important. And I think too, when we start to look at the importance, a lot of the times when we look at this too, right, fossil fuel industries are trying to point the finger at someone else. Typically, that's us, right? They're trying to tell us that we're the problem. There's too many of us. There's overpopulation. And sure, overpopulation and an increase in CO2 are somewhat related, but it's not really our fault that we are in this climate crisis. I like to say this quote by Robin Maynard. It is not humanity that poisons so much earthly, human, and non-human life, but a small and highly powerful minority of humanity and the order they have imposed all of earthly life. It is a way of all lives mattering the climate crisis by both erasing the real authors and the first victims of the crimes enacted on planetary life. So when we're looking at the history of the climate crisis, they don't want us to do that. They don't want us to look back at how we got here, who was harmed, because then they would be exposing themselves. And that is the whole point of misinformation, is to point the finger at someone else and go, no one was hurt. No one was going through health problems because of what we did. And that is the point that they want to get across to folks. And it's through really great materials like the Zin Education Project. They have a whole climate crisis timeline. It goes back as far as when Christopher Columbus discovered America, talking about how that had environmental impacts, what those environmental impacts could look like, and who was harmed in the process. And so all of these, it's a really, really big timeline. I would recommend folks to check out Zin Education Project more specifically, but their timeline project is a really handy resource when it comes to explaining the history of the climate crisis. And that, again, is why we can't just teach about climate change in our science classes. Had we been taught this in history, I would have learned a lot, actually. And it's a fun, interactive tool that they use as well. So it's really important that we kind of look at the different materials that are going on. The Zen Education Project is really great because these are materials made by scientists, by teachers, by professors, by experts. And that is what climate justice education is truly rooted in. It's about science. It's about teaching the accurate science and the accurate history of the climate crisis as well. So a really big tool that we use at Climate Generation is this timeline. So I recommend it for anybody. Excuse me. But in practice too, and I got this from the Waka Foundation and the National Association on Environmental Education. I learned too many acronyms, but they put together this really cool report called Mapping the Landscape of K through 12 Climate Education Policy. And two of them, they have a whole bunch on different subjects, but they have one on science and they have one on math in terms of how to teach it. So in practice, how does that look like? I want to talk specifically about the art one, just because part of my work is going to different schools and really practicing what I'm preaching right now, right? And so in the north side of Minneapolis, I actually worked with a group of high school students in 9th grade in their social studies classes. And our big project was to end the semester with an art project. And so students learned about effective ways of communicating a political message. They learned the history of protest and art. And then from there, students had a chance to make their own form of protest art, whether it's through a protest sign, a speech, a poem. And what came of it was really beautiful. When you look at the kids of the north side, they are in the center of a lot of pollution. So to hear how they took these lessons and applied it to their day-to-day lives, it was very motivating. It was devastating, but it was really great to see them take these lessons and see, I'm a part of something way bigger and I didn't know it. And so when we teach youth about these things, it also gives them that community of like, there are people who think like me that want to do good things as well. You have a question? Yeah. Yes. Yes, absolutely. They definitely felt like they had more agency to, once I gave them the lessons, they're like, oh, I didn't know you could communicate about hating a trash burner or all of these different things, right? They're like, I didn't know how to communicate that. They're like, I would have just used a bunch of cuss words and hope that my message got across, but you taught us how to do it short and effective and making sure that it's targeting the people that it needs to target, which are elected officials. So these types of lessons are really important to try and practice. But of course, we know that that's not going to be easy. And that's why a lot of the times we try to do it with activities. I'm a youth worker as well. So on top of the environmental work, I work with high school students. And it's a very fun job. But with that, you learn a lot about how lessons and all of these things can really get across to young people. And I say that you got to gamify everything, turn everything into a game, turn everything into something fun, something that I like to do with my students. And I've done this with middle school students. So they were my first group to kind of test this thing out with. It's called the Thingamabob game. And this is a simulation on capitalism versus the climate. So the way that this game is set up is I have a big prize. It's usually like this massive chocolate bar from Trader Joe's. And I put it at the front of the classroom, and I go, okay, each of you split up into groups. Okay, each of you as a group, you're a company. Come up with a company name. They're playing, they're coming up with funny names. Okay, the goal for you is to make as many thingamabobs as possible. The way you win this big chocolate bar is by giving me a ton of profit. Fail to make a profit, your company goes bankrupt and you have to join another group. So every round, they have to give me a number of how many thingamabobs they made, but none of them know how many of them made, right? So they're like, I'm giving you the biggest number, but the other group might be giving me a bigger number. So they don't know these things. And once we do a report back, I also let them know, like, here's your environmental impact too. So I'm letting them know, like, you made this many thingamabobs. This is how many emissions of CO2 you put into the atmosphere. But what they don't know is what is the point of no return when it comes to emissions. So they're making and making and making and making. And then by the end, I'm like, okay, you guys reached such a level of pollution that our planet is gone. We're no longer here, which is what that other image right there, that's a little darker, that says, look at the devastation, son. There's almost nothing left. And none of them win the chocolate bar. I'm like, none of you win because you took all the resources away and that's not okay. And they were like, what? Why did you do that? And I was like, well, you destroyed the planet, so you don't get anything. And so it gives them this like idea of like, wow, we really don't win when we're just running and running and producing and making these things with no needs for it, and we're taking our natural resources. And that was just an overview of what the game looks like. If you're ever curious, I would recommend people Google the Thingamabob game. There's more instructions, there's different ways that you can play it. And I find it fun. Of course, the students hate me at the end because they're like, so we don't get a chocolate. I'm like, nope, no chocolate for you. So it's pretty funny, and it's like the reactions that you get, like it's that fun that they kind of see, right? And then you get to have discussions with them afterwards. I also do this more specifically with high school students. It's called Meeting Today's Climate Activists, a mixer on the people saving the world. The way that we start this game is we have printed photos of climate activism all over the world. I tape them up to the walls. Students get to walk and observe each of the photos, and they reflect on them. They reflect by using I see, I feel, and I wonder. And they leave sticky notes on every photo, and it gives them that sense of like, okay, this is what global activism is truly looking like. Once they have gone through that and they've reflected, they are assigned a different climate activist from all over the world. They get a climate activist and their story. So where this person is from, what they're working on, and the issue that they're tackling. And from there, students learn about who they are they learn about the specific activist they got assigned, but then they are tasked to network with other activists. And they are given about 12 questions just relating to like, who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing? The point is to learn from each other, right? So it's one thing to be like, here's a climate activist. Okay, here's another one. Okay, here's another one. It's different for them to really feel like, okay, I am this climate activist, and I'm going to go talk to other climate activists. How does that look like? What questions do I ask? And how can we talk to each other? Again, it's that effective communication that we're trying to simulate for them, while also teaching them about the different climate activism that is going around the world. And the beauty of climate justice education is that it really opens a student's mind to start thinking in a global perspective as well. Oftentimes, I feel like, especially in the States, we're taught like the United States only and nothing else. And the beauty of it is like, what is it looking like in other countries like the global South? And how are we really interacting with these folks, right? And a lot of students have even told me like, are these people like real? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, oh my God, they were my age when they did this. How is that possible? And it's so like they get to like start to wonder a lot of the times. And so that's also the beauty is like we're teaching them these things and then they go home and want to research stuff instead of listening to Joe Rogan. So it's like it's these lessons that we're opening up for these students that we're doing through simulation. There are a couple hubs that we are always advocating for and always pushing for. So New Jersey was one of the first states to implement climate justice education into their state. I believe it was their governor who was like, yeah, let's just do it. Boom, fast tracked. And they created this hub. And as you can see here, it goes through different grades, subjects, resource types, and it just kind of does everything for you. And this is specifically to New Jersey, which is really great. And it talks about New Jersey's ecosystems and the environments there. And then the Zen Education Project kind of does the same thing where they put together that timeline. And they also gave me the idea for these games that we just kind of went through. So both of these games actually come from Zen Education. And these are resources that are made by people all over the world, not just the country, but all over the world. And it's a really great hub. And it's something that we're trying to get done here in Minnesota. So what I am trying to get done with my students is climate justice education in the state. So The purpose of the Climate Justice Education Bill is to create materials for the development of a climate justice education guide in Minnesota. This guide will support educators in weaving climate justice lessons and materials like videos, activities, data, maps, templates, what have you, into their lesson plans. Our goal is for this bill to be interdisciplinary, or better known as adopted into any grade or school subject. And we're hoping for it to be specific and relate specifically to Minnesota and our beautiful environment here, right? So what we like to say is that this is not a curriculum. It is more just a guide. Like, okay, I'm a science, I'm an arts teacher. What could I weave into my lessons around art, right? And when you're looking at these resources, you see here that there's videos, there's a lesson plan if you want to incorporate it. The last thing we ever want to do is tell teachers how to teach. What we want to do is give them guidance and give them a framework for how they can weave in different lessons or different materials into their already existing lesson plans. It makes it a little easier for them to teach climate change because a lot of the times teachers don't teach it because they don't know how to. And so what we're proposing is to create a sort of hub like this. And the reason why we're proposing for this to be something that lives in the Minnesota Department of Education is so that they fund it. It's easy to find, it's free, and it provides protections for teachers too. So if we're mandating that if we're mandating that the Minnesota Department of Education has this, teachers can go, listen, don't tell me anything. They're providing this for me and I can teach it. So it provides them that layer of protection, right, that they often face when it comes to like, you're indoctrinating our kids, you're teaching them stuff I don't want you to teach them. They could go, well, the state said I can, so there you go. This would be in compliance with our social studies standards and our science standards, which do reflect teaching about climate change and reflecting on ethnic studies. So we are good. We just got to get that hub going. But the history of this bill is very unique because it actually came from young people. So that high school program I was telling y'all about, the Youth Environmental Activist Network, this idea for climate justice education came from them. They came to our meetings. Actually, funny enough, last week, one of my students was like, I have another bill idea. And I'm like, tell me. So we are always giving them the space for them to really do this. So in 2019 is when they came up with the idea. They surveyed their peers. They surveyed teachers in their schools. And so they were able to kind of get the ball rolling on this. And in 2020 and 2021, it was first introduced thanks to Senator Chamberlain and Senator Jordan. As you can see here in 2023, it also got its first hearing in the House and the Senate, thanks to Representative Kraft and Senator Mitchell. It was a stressful time for us when the news around Senator Mitchell dropped. I'll just say that. But we have done, it was thanks to them that we were able to get some hearings though. Did it make it far? Unfortunately not, but yeah, go ahead.
Chamberlain.
Yes. No, it was a different person. Oh, yes, yes. Yes, it was when I did this show, I'm like, should I put their first names? I'm like, no, if someone asks, I'll tell them no. But no, this was,
Education.
oh, maybe it was.
I think it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes people can't say no to youth. And they're a really great resource for that. And they're a great tool to talk with Republicans on this. But that's the beauty of our high school program. It's not just kids in the cities, it's kids all over the state. And so they come in handy when we're trying to get Republicans on our side. As of this year, we are working on the bill with Representative Athena Hollins, a really great champion for climate change. And we are looking to get a different Senate chief author for no particular reason. We're just looking for a new one. And the bill language has been slightly altered. We wanted there to be more funding for professional development for our teachers. So we have been working with ethnic studies for a really long time, and I've been seeing how they do professional development for teachers around that. And it was very inspiring, but also very expensive. So after learning that, I tried to include in the bill more funding for professional development, and it can't just be like a one-off thing. It needs to be continuous. So something we're also advocating for.
Did you approach Senator Gustafson?
No, not yet.
She's on the education committee. She's a teacher.
Yeah.
She's also a friend.
Love that. No, good to know. Yeah, we did reach out to Senator Mary Kunesh, very supportive of the bill. She couldn't take it on this year, unfortunately, but that's totally okay. Also, It was an interesting start to the session this year. So we we got a little discombobulated, but sadly this bill didn't really get out of the revisor's office this year. Again, for the same reason. We started sessions, ended session, started session. And so we got lost in it, but we will come back next year for sure and try to get this across the finish line, or at least get another hearing, which brings us to how we get involved. We're always trying to engage community members, educators, and young people around this bill. I typically do it with this presentation, really showing people why we need this, showing people all over the state the importance of this. And I do this specifically through workshops. So last year we were in Morris, Minnesota, and we had to be a little careful about the messaging we gave, but we got creative. And instead of talking about specifically this, I taught them how to reach out to their legislator. How do you look them up? How do you reach out to them? And how do you craft a message? So we're teaching them those things pretty secretively without being too political. So we always have to get creative with how we're doing outreach, but that is something that we're doing. And although we didn't get a hearing, we are planning to do more outreach through meeting with students, doing presentations like this, tabling, and through Yeah. So I have 10 students that we pay, and they're with us throughout the whole year. And those students help us get all of this stuff done too. So it's not just me. I have a group of really cool, very sweet, and very hip young people that are always with me. And so we are trying to figure out what summer planning is looking like. We're really trying to get more young people to be building a base for this, so that when school starts up again, those young people can then ask their teachers to join the base as well, and we can build this intergenerational coalition of folks. But of course, we're always welcoming community members as well. And when the time comes, we're definitely going to need testifiers. As most folks know, with the House, we are evenly split. We're going to need Republicans to sign off on this, and we're going to need Democrats to sign off on it. So we're really going to need those personal stories when it comes down to it. But otherwise, we're just trying to build a really strong base. And the one pagers, we have a couple other ways that folks can get involved, but we're always developing more tools and resources for young people and other people in general to just do outreach around this. And I hope that this presentation gave you guys enough insight and enough talking points to really want to advocate for this. This presentation is part of the work we're doing. We go through different schools, but I also love to do this hands-on. Like I said, I did that art lesson with those kids in the north side, and we're hoping to keep doing it with more students. We did a couple presentations in Roseville, Brooklyn Park, and really just teaching students not only about climate justice education, but also other climate solutions. So we're always partnering with folks to try and get the point across around this work that we're doing. We were talking before the meeting started, sometimes it's really hard to get young people to want to join and get involved. So we're always getting creative on how to do that as well. With our Yeah meetings, we host a bunch of students every week. Every week we give them a different lesson. We incorporate art. We feed them a dinner. We do fun events like art making, documentary screenings, and what have you. And so we're always trying to get more creative in terms of what we can do to get more young people to want to join and stay as well. So once you get them in, doesn't mean that they're going to stay with you forever, but that is what we're doing right now. I would say we have about 5 of our students who have been with us since they were 9th graders, and they're graduating this year. And we're like, oh, that's I'm very happy for them, and it's really sweet to see them grow up. But we are getting a little scared in terms of now we got to find 5 other students to come and join us. But we are pretty confident in us getting more young people to join our coalition in the work that we're doing. I do have a QR code if folks want to scan it. We are always giving folks an opportunity to just be a part of our action alerts. The climate justice education bill is not the only policy work that I am doing. We're doing stuff around shutting down the HERC incinerator in North Minneapolis. We're part of the Zero Waste Coalition as well, advocating for solutions that are actually going to tackle our issue of overconsumption. And we are a part of national-wide programs as well. So NAAE, they have a countrywide coalition of folks that are trying to implement climate justice education into their different states. We're a pretty large coalition, but it's a really great network that we're a part of as well. So we do a whole bunch of other policy work on top of this stuff that we do. So if you want to stay involved, please feel free to. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer questions as well. My only other slide is this photo of me and my students presenting on the bill. And also my contact information. We're in pretty great relationship with the Minnesota Youth Council. So this is the official state partner that deals with all young affairs and everything like that. And they had their own mock hearing one time, and they're like, come talk about your bill. We want to learn about it. It passed through their committee and no questions were asked. So I think we did a pretty great job, and it gave my students an opportunity to practice that messaging as well. But you all can always email me or call me or anything like that if you want to learn more about how to get involved, or if you just want to learn more about the bill too. And then I have our website as well. And that is where our resource library is there. But yeah, that is all I really have. If there's any questions, yeah, go ahead.
Are you actually going into schools and doing these games and teaching? A teacher, does a teacher invite you to come do that, or?
Sometimes we get invited, other times we email. And so we get a lot of emails thanks to our students or thanks to our partners. We also partner with teacher unions, and they also give us a lot of access to this. Not only do we do it in schools, but we do it in other after-school programs. So we actually have a really great partnership with the Kitty Youth Anderson Center at the Science Museum. And they always have a cohort of young people. I actually did the thingamabob game with their students. They did not want to do it at first, but I was like, too bad. So yeah, we sometimes get invited, or we invite ourselves and see what we can do.
Districts.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say the pushback is more like, this is too political, or like, this is divisive. Sometimes teachers are like, this does not align with what I teach. That's really hard, because that requires a deeper conversation that I have to have with them. Oftentimes, sadly, it is like social studies teachers who are like, that doesn't align with what I'm teaching here. That does not. And so I have to, oftentimes I show them the timeline. I'm like, well, actually it does. And here's how you can do it. So yeah, we get pushback. We have managed as a team and as an organization to come up with ways to answer to them without arguing, without causing more division, but we definitely are like, no. So yeah.
So is there like a group of you doing multiple schools, or are you it, or?
It's me and two of our staff members who do the youth programming. So I don't run the youth program. I have two lovely coworkers who do that. So it's the three of us and our program coordinator. So four of us, but we need more people. I always say we need more people, especially when it comes to talking about policy work, which I think is pretty motivating and inspiring to me to see that oftentimes when young people want us to come and talk to them, it's mostly around policy and it's mostly around advocacy work. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's four of us.
And trying to get people to work with you, is that something that you do?
Yes, we actually have a Green Corps member right now. And they're actually doing a really great project, not out yet, but they're doing a really great project, really monitoring how climate education is being like treated all over the country. It's a really long project that they're doing, but yeah, we partner with folks through that. It's sometimes through internships too. A lot of the times my students, once they graduate and go off to college, they're like, can I have an internship? And I'm like, absolutely. So I actually have two interns coming up this summer. Two of them are both of my former students, and it's really awesome. And they want to learn about policy, and they're like, no one wants to hire me because I'm 19 or 18. And so I'm like, I got you, come on in and let's get you up to speed. So yeah, we do internships and we do partnerships with the Green Corps that way. Any other questions, folks? Yeah.
The slide that showed the social media and the right meeting, why do you think that is?
I think it's ads. When we're looking again at the history of how this all got pushed, it's because they had a lot of money. And the same thing is being done with these shows. A lot of right-wingers have a lot of money, and a lot of the times that they have ads for their shows. I often get ads for these shows. I don't know why I do, because I am completely left-leaning, but I still do. Like they're paying a lot of money, especially when you look at these corporations like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. You don't really know who's monitoring those ads. They just get pushed. So I would say it's ads, but also it's because a lot of these right-wingers have noticed like, oh, social media is a really great space for us to kind of push our messaging, we're going to just solely focus on that. And that is why we're really trying to push, right, for this, the gamification of it all, right? It's through these types of practices, it's through these games, it's through these mixers, right? Like we want to make sure that these lessons aren't just like focused on schools, but it could translate into the real world too. So there's a number of different other reasons, I'm sure, but I would say those are the big ones. Money, and they know they have influence there. So unfortunately, but
And maybe answer this with Kate's question. Taking some notes.
Yeah.
Have you done much with the White Bear Lake schools?
not yet. Not yet. I think we've emailed back and forth, but never really could like nail down a date for us to come in and talk about it. There are often times where we connect with the teacher and then they're like, the district's not letting me do it anymore. Or like, we're behind on our curriculum, we're behind on our schedule, you can't come in. Like, so I think that's what ended up happening with White Bear Lake schools, but we are always reaching out to high school teachers specifically to try and get more involved with them. So we're always, you know, if you can connect us, we're always welcoming of that too. However we can get into these schools, we're totally down. So these are great questions, guys. Any other ones? I think we have like 2 minutes. I'm on time.
Is your group, the Climate Generation, do you work with other youth based climate groups like Sunrise Movement or?
Yeah.
So do you collaborate with them on this type of thing as well, or?
I would say collaboration has not happened in a bit just because we're all doing our own different things, but we are all in solidarity of each other, right? We go to our events, we go to our rallies, we go to our things. And I would say we're with Metro Blooms. They're a really big youth organization as well. MNIPL used to have Youth in Power. I think they're still active. We haven't talked in a bit, but we do a lot of our events with them as well. Our high schoolers every year throw the Youth Climate Justice Summit. It's a summit hosted in St. Paul. It's also kind of like a lobby day. And we have a lot of partners through that as well. So it's like my students are planning and leading the summit, and it's for high school students. The only adults there are staff. So we often have a lot of big partners through that too. So always growing, always expanding. This last year we had 120 students from all over Minnesota show up. We're just looking to expand more. So I think our partnerships with different people are kind of paying off, I hope. So
Yeah, I would think that, you know, working with all those other, you know, youth-centered groups, and your message for educating and how you're approaching that, if you can get those other groups as well to be, you know, singing off the same song sheet.
Yeah.
On this, I think that would be very powerful.
Yeah, we're pretty connected with the youth that did ethnic studies work as well. Those, oh my God, those young people, I was like, you are eons above me when it comes to organizing. It is wild, but we're also in partnership with them. And we like to bridge different issues, not just stay in climate spaces too. So that's been pretty beneficial to us as well. So we're just going to keep doing that. But yeah, like I said, youth outreach is a little tricky. We haven't quite figured out the equation for it. I don't think there is, but yeah, we're always trying to figure that out.
So does your organization have, I'm sure you're tied up funding like most, do you have a lobbyist that you use in your policy work you're in?
Yes, that's me. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, but I want a team of me's. That would be really helpful. I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon, but yeah, it's just me, and sometimes my high school students also help out when they can, but they're also students, so it's pretty tricky. And a lot of the times political meetings, committee hearings, and all that happen during the school day. So it's a little tricky for them to show up. So we get creative, but yeah, it's just me for now. Not complaining, but I definitely want more, if that makes sense. So thank you. Sweet. We can. I will stop sharing.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll shut things down. And a few people online.
Sweet. I think we just got to stop the